Hey, it's Scott, ROCKFILE, back with another podcast for you. Going to talk about the difference between surround sound and immersive sound and why you should be getting into it right now in 2024. I'm going to go into a little history, but I'll just start by saying over last weekend, I rearranged my surround sound system. I tried it a little bit differently. I have a minor Dolby Atmos setup, and the changes I made all the difference in the world. It's incredible how much better the stereo sounds in all things in stereo 5.1 and Dolby Atmos. But wow. And that reminded me why I even do this. So back in the day, the earliest surround sound you could get at home was like the Pro Logic systems. Dolby Pro Logic separated things into right, left, and center, and then gave you a mono double channel in the back. And then Pro Logic EX gave us stereo channels in the back. Eventually, we got to digital 5.1. That was as close as you could get at the time to the theatrical experience. Now, today, we have two object-based surround sound systems that they're calling immersive audio. They're not even calling them surround sound anymore. DTS-X and Dolby Atmos. These are the latest iterations of both of those surround sound systems. I was always a huge DTS fan up until current generation because DTS was the first one to go more lossless. The original 5.1 from Dolby was a lossy format. It was compressed where DTS was not. And DTS stayed at the forefront for many, many years of the audiophile's preference. And when it comes to movie marketing and movies getting made, certain movie studios have deals in place with Dolby or DTS to make sure that when they come out on home video or whatever, they have that particular soundtrack. For example, Universal Pictures tends to put DTS soundtracks on their Blu-rays and 4Ks. The new DTS-X is the latest, which is object-based. I'll get a little bit into, I'm not going to get into like scientific details on how these things are different, but I'll explain it kind of in layman's terms. So as someone who's been into surround sound from the beginning, my father matrixed stereo into 4 channels in our basement. It was, there were quadraphonic mixes back then, but you really couldn't buy a quadraphonic decoder at home back in the 70s. But my dad did hook up a pair of back speakers and kind of get that whole surround sound thing going on. Even back then, we had parties in the basement and people loved the fact that we had speakers in every corner. It was, it was predating what we do now for home theaters and stuff. So these days, the most popular way to get sound out of your TV is a sound bar. And I'm not going to diss sound bars. They're much better than the speakers that come in most TVs these days. As TVs have gotten thinner, we just don't have room to put speakers in them anymore. And they still try, but it's thin. There's no bass. On the more expensive models, they've actually attached speaker compartments on the back of the TV to put subwoofers and stuff on it. But I've been using outboard sound for my TV since the 80s. I've had the Dolby Pro Logic and the Dolby Digital and the Dolby 5.1 and so on and so forth. I have always had surround sound in my living room. It's just been always a thing. Scott always had that to watch movies. I wanted the theatrical experience at home the best I could do. It was an expensive proposition for many years. It's gotten cheaper over the years. Like I'm currently in an apartment, so I don't have the largest living room, and I'm using a Klipsch 5.1 reference sound system that I got for really cheap, and it sounds amazing. Subwoofer and everything. And then I added a couple more speakers, and I'm running a 5.1.2 Dolby Atmos setup. Now, what I did over the weekend to change my surround, Dolby recommends that if you have height channels, and my receiver can't do 4 height channels, it can only do 2. I need to upgrade, but we're talking a significant amount of money to upgrade. This was an older Dolby Atmos receiver, but it does great. Anyway, in the original setup, it said put your height speakers in the front. And the way my living room was set up, that was easy for me because I had the main right and left speakers lower on these bookshelves, so I put the height speakers on top. And for over a year and a half, I've been listening to movies and music that way, and I've really enjoyed the Dolby Atmos experience. I get things flying over my head and around me a little bit. I mean, it definitely doesn't compare to what I've heard in a Dolby Cinema, where Dolby Cinemas are equipped with Dolby Atmos and Dolby Vision HDR for all of their movies, every movie that shows in one. If you ever get to see one, it's pretty amazing. So I was watching a Sweetwater video. Sweetwater is a store where a lot of musicians, podcasters, YouTubers, that kind of stuff get equipment, microphones, boom arms, amplifiers, monitors, you name it. You can get everything from Sweetwater. They have decent prices. They have incredible customer service and fast shipping. So they also have a video channel where they go over new products and such. And there was a video a week or two ago where their expert was showing a modest Dolby Atmos system for mixing in Dolby Atmos. If you wanted to mix music or movies in that surround sound format, you need a certain number of speakers to do so. And in setting up his modest Dolby Atmos setup, he put the two speakers not in the front, but in the middle, on the sides, kind of aiming at the listener in the middle. I had a bit of an epiphany, and so I went into my menu settings on my Dolby Atmos, and I do have a setting to have top speakers in the front, in the middle, or in the back. And so I have two more bookshelves than I had when I originally set it up. I put one on each side. I put the speakers on top, and I reset up my Onkyo receiver, which, by the way, is a great brand. It's been a brand I've stayed with for pretty much the 80s. Clean amps, good surround sound. Onkyo is a decent brand that you can find at big box stores pretty much everywhere. They got bought out a few years ago, but the quality has stayed up so far. Anyway, I went into the menu settings and set up the speakers instead of being in the front for being in the middle as height, and then reran the Accu EQ, which is a software that comes in the receiver. You put a microphone in the middle of your listening space. The other thing I did when I moved the speakers around is I started getting them more equidistant to the listening. They're all about 68 to 70 inches from your ears if you're sitting in the middle of this circle of speakers I've created. So it's not huge, right? And so I moved these two upper speakers to the up and then kind of took my back speakers and moved them a little farther to the back and got everything equidistant, ran that Accu EQ, and then sat down to start testing it. The system was amazingly immersive. Like I was in a bubble of sound. Movies are now envelop me. It's a completely different sound than like surround sound. Surround sound, for all the decades I've had, it's been nice hearing music and sound effects behind you or swishing past you or whatever, moving from front to back or left to right. But with the new object-based surround sounds, they can literally pinpoint bullets, sound effects, helicopters, whatever, where they want it in the mix in that room. And Dolby Atmos and DTX will automatically adjust for whatever room you're watching it in. This is all pretty high-tech stuff that we have in our homes for not much money. The receiver was $300 to $350. The surround sound was about that. So you can get into this for under $1,000. You know, and that sounds like a lot of money, but these days sound bars are costing $200-$300 for decent ones. You can spend that much and get great speakers all the way around and a nice AV receiver and be able to not only listen to things in surround sound and immersive audio, but be able to control your whole system. It makes things a lot easier to just run the TV out as a monitor and have everything just kind of switch from there. Why would you need to spend that much money or whatever? Well, most of the movies, TV shows, and streaming content all come in some kind of surround sound. And if you just have that one sound bar at the front, you're missing out on a whole lot. And there are sound bars that are trying to recreate Atmos and such. Atmos is scalable. It realizes the system you have and delivers the best sound for your system. So if you don't have a 5.1 or a 7.1 or a 5.1.4 or whatever, it'll do the best it can and give you the best sound. Sony and a few other companies have brand new systems where you basically put a sound bar out and a couple other speakers, and it recreates a Dolby Atmos type dome in your living room. Several other companies have put out just a 4-speaker system. You put them in each corner, and then it recreates that. Dolby Atmos can be scalable, and its modern technology is pretty amazing as far as sound goes. But the difference between watching a movie in 5.1, like our movie theaters here are a version of 7.1 or whatever, and they sound fine. But this, watching, and I've only watched a few movies in this new configuration, listened to a few albums in this new configuration, but it's just much more like a Dolby theater, much more like you're in a dome of sound, a globe of sound that's just all around you. I rewatched Deadpool, the original Deadpool, in Dolby Atmos last night, and it was an eye-opening experience. This is a movie I've seen probably 10 times, but this was the best it had ever sounded because I just moved some speakers around, got everything equidistant, and ran this EQ setting on my receiver. Now, again, you can buy sound bars that will recreate Dolby Atmos. You can buy sound bars that have back speakers and even subwoofers. If you want to go that route, I'm not saying anything bad about sound bars. That may be best for somebody's setup. So do that. Do something other than the speakers that come with your TV and get the most, because it turns out that audio is a bigger part of the movie and streaming experience than you even imagine, that the average human imagines. But when you sit in your average movie or your average streaming show and you're listening to it in surround sound, they have gone to great lengths to put you into the restaurant or into the bar or into the car chase or whatever. Gone to great lengths to create that soundtrack to give you that immersive feel, and you're not getting it. You're just watching it through two speakers, and it's fine. I'm sure it's fine, but I'm telling you, it makes a huge difference in impact, in emotions, and how you experience a movie. Hearing some of the soundtracks, where they are and their placement now, it's a different experience. Everything has this smooth feel to it. I really didn't realize moving some speakers just a few inches would make this big a deal, but it did. So, highly recommend, if you do get one of these systems, to follow the instructions, watch some YouTube videos, and set it up the way it should be set up. If you can do that. I know I've been in a relationship where the significant other didn't want to have speaker wires everywhere, and I have some wireless things. I'm not a big fan of that, but like my subwoofer is wireless, and that's just fine. The other speaker wires have been able to hide behind furniture and stuff. I have one that's taped down, and it's the best I can do, but I'll put a carpet over it or something. Anyway, I have just made this because I fell in love with my surround sound over the weekend, and I'm sharing it with you guys. That's what this podcast is for, is to share the things I really enjoy. And I love watching movies in surround sound. It's just always been something that's been more immersive for me to watch, even back in the 80s and 90s. And now with Dolby Atmos and DTS:X, it's just a whole different ballgame, and it's affordable. You know, you can spend less than you spend on your TV and get a decent setup for Dolby Atmos. I highly recommend it. If this sounds alien to you and you don't want to mess with it, well, I understand, but there are quite a few YouTube videos out there, reviewers who review the new technology. Digital Trends is one of my favorites. Caleb Dennison does a great job about telling you whether or not you need this TV or need this surround sound setup. It may be more than you need, and he's very honest about that. Is it worth the money, that kind of thing, the build, the sound quality, that kind of thing. So there's a lot of research to be done, and you probably don't do that much research on the technology you buy these days. You just want a new phone or a new Apple Watch or whatever. But I'm telling you, surround sound, if you watch a lot of streaming content, watch a lot of movies, and these days a lot of people are, you should be getting more out of it than just the video. Get that audio, get that high definition, that immersive audio that puts you there. It makes a huge difference in the impact of the film and your enjoyment of it. So highly recommend Dolby Atmos and DTS:X if you can do it. Now, the funny thing is these days that pretty much Universal is one of the only ones using DTX, and even some of their DTS:X movies I would expect to be DTS:X come out in Dolby Atmos. Dolby Atmos won this one so far, but we'll see how it goes from here. Highly recommend movies in surround sound. Now, in immersive audio. And don't get me even started on what it's done for some albums. New albums from Pearl Jam, Peter Gabriel, and Steven Wilson. All albums that are elevated by the Atmos mix. They're fine albums to listen to in 2-channel stereo, but in Atmos, they take on a whole new ballgame. That could be a whole nother podcast about music. There's not a whole lot of music being put out in Atmos, but if you stream like Apple Music, a lot of theirs is. So give it a shot. Again, you have all of this content that's out there, and you're not using it because you have a 2-channel setup or you're using your TV speakers or whatever. You're missing half of the picture, so to speak. So check it out. There's a lot of audio and a lot of different configurations and price points. Get into immersive audio. It's a good time to do so. I'm Scott. I'm ROCKFILE. Thanks for taking time out of your day to listen to a podcast about some geeky stuff. I promise we'll get back to movie reviews and such next. Have a spectacular day.